Christmas dinner was supposed to be simple. Warm lights, the smell of roasted chicken, soft carols humming behind the chatter. I had spent the afternoon helping set the table. Name cards, polished silverware, the old red candles Melissa liked when she was 10. I placed my red shawl on the back of my chair, the same one she used to tug on when she was little, begging me to braid her hair before church. When everyone finally settled, I thought the night would pass quietly. I was wrong. Melissa stood up so abruptly her chair scraped across the floor. Conversation died mid-sentence. Every face turned toward her. She didn't look at any of them, only at me. "Mom," she said, loud enough for the entire room, "leave. You're ruining Christmas." The fork in my hand slipped and hit the plate. The sound cut through the music like a blade. Nobody breathed. Not my nephew, not the friends she invited, not the couple from her husband's office who barely knew us. They just stared, waiting for me to defend myself, to ask what I had done. I didn't, because the truth was simple. I hadn't done anything. I looked at my daughter, her perfect bun, her expensive earrings, the cold satisfaction in her eyes. She wanted this. She wanted an audience. I reached for my shawl slowly, deliberately. My hands didn't shake. "If that's what you want," I said. Someone whispered, "Melissa, don't do this." But she didn't even flinch. "You heard me," she snapped. "Leave." I stood. The room blurred, not from tears, but from the weight of the moment. I had carried this girl through every storm of her life, and now she wanted me gone in front of all these people. I glanced around the table one last time. Every eye lowered when I met them. No one spoke up, no one dared, except one, George. He sat at the far end of the table, quiet, still, his jaw clenched. He didn't move to stop me. He didn't move to defend Melissa. He simply watched. And in the silence, in the heaviness of that moment, I understood him better than ever. He had seen enough. "Mom, hurry up," Melissa added, as if she was asking me to pass the salt. I wrapped the red shawl around my shoulders. The warmth of the fabric contrasted sharply with the coldness spreading through my chest. I walked toward the door. My steps were slow, controlled. Dignity is measured in how you leave a room, not how you enter it. Somebody near the fireplace muttered, "This isn't right." But no one stood. No one moved. I reached the front door and opened it. The winter wind rushed in, crisp and merciless. Behind me, the room held its breath. Christmas lights glittered on the porch railing, the ones I had helped Melissa hang earlier that week while she scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging me. I stepped outside. The cold hit my face, sharp and honest. For a second, I almost expected footsteps behind me. George's voice, or maybe Melissa rushing out, realizing what she had done. But the door stayed open just long enough for me to hear one last thing. The music stopped. George had turned off the speaker. Something in the air shifted. I didn't look back. I pulled the shawl tighter and walked to the end of the porch. Snowflakes drifted through the light, landing on the railing like tiny warnings. My breath formed a small cloud as I exhaled. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I simply left. When I reached the bottom step, I finally turned my head. Through the open doorway, I saw Melissa gesturing dramatically, trying to reclaim control of the room. But no one looked at her anymore. They were looking at George. He was still seated, but his eyes followed me. Cold, sharp, calculating in a way I hadn't seen in years. He didn't speak, not a word, but I knew exactly what that silence meant. The man who never raised his voice had just made a decision, and Melissa had no idea what she had awakened. I opened my car door. The interior light flicked on, washing the driveway in a soft yellow glow. I sat for a moment, letting the cold air settle over me like a second shawl. My hands rested on the steering wheel, still steady. Inside the house, voices rose in confusion. Chairs shifted. Someone closed the front door quickly, as if shutting me out made the problem disappear. But the real problem was still sitting at the table, my husband, my silent judge. I started the engine. The dashboard lights lit up the car. Outside, the last strand of Christmas lights flickered. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced once more toward the house. The curtains moved. George was standing at the window. Not with anger, with certainty. He didn't lift a hand. He didn't nod. He simply watched me leave, and that was enough. Because in our 40 years of marriage, I had learned one truth. When George went quiet, something irreversible was coming, and Melissa had no idea what I would do next, or what he would do for me. The road home was quiet. Houses on both sides had Christmas lights, but I barely looked at them. I kept replaying Melissa's voice in my head. When I parked the car in our driveway, I sat there for a few seconds. Then I went inside. The house was dark. I turned on a small lamp and sat at the kitchen table. My hands were still steady. After almost 2 hours, I heard the garage door open. George walked in. He hung his coat on the hook and looked at me. He didn't turn on another light. I said, "You stayed longer than I expected." He replied, "I needed to." I nodded slightly. "So you saw everything?" "Yes," he said. I waited. He didn't move closer. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, calm, focused. I said, "She told me to leave like I was nothing." "I heard her," he answered. I kept my eyes on him. "In front of everyone?" "Yes." He walked to the table and sat across from me. His voice stayed even. "Do you want to tell me how you felt?" "No," I said. "There's nothing to explain." He leaned forward a little. "It wasn't just disrespect." "I know. It was intentional." "I know that too." He looked straight at me. "I saw enough." The room stayed silent for a moment. I said quietly, "I didn't argue with her." "You shouldn't have to," he replied. "She wanted an audience." "Yes," George said. "And she had one." I asked, "Did she say anything after I left?" "Nothing that mattered." I didn't push further. George wasn't the kind of man who added emotion where it wasn't needed. He continued, "She crossed a line." "She did." He rested his hand on the table. "Are you expecting me to do something?" "No," I said. "I'm not asking for anything." "You don't need to," he replied. His tone didn't change, but the decision inside it was clear. Final. I looked at him. "What are you thinking?" "That respect shouldn't depend on who's watching." I nodded. "I agree." He added, "She thinks there won't be consequences." "She always thought that." "Not anymore." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't sound angry. He sounded resolved. I said, "George, don't act out of anger." "This isn't anger," he said. "This is correction." I stayed silent. He spoke again. "You were her mother. You built everything she stands on. And she told you to leave your seat at your own family's Christmas dinner." "Yes," I said. "That won't stand," he answered. He pushed his chair back and stood. I asked, "Where are you going?" "To look at some documents," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." "George," I said, "don't do anything tonight." "I won't," he replied, "but I'm not letting this pass." He walked toward the hallway. Before he turned the corner, I said, "You're sure?" He didn't hesitate. Completely. Then he added one last line, sharp and controlled. "She embarrassed you in public. I'll answer her in a way she understands." He left the kitchen and closed the bedroom door behind him. I stayed at the table. The kettle on the stove clicked softly as it cooled, but the house was silent otherwise. George had spoken only simple sentences, but each one carried weight. He didn't threaten. He didn't comfort. He didn't speculate. He made a decision. And Melissa had no idea that her 5 words at dinner had already changed the entire direction of her life. The next morning, I went into the storage room. I didn't plan it. I just walked there and opened the old box on the shelf. Inside were papers, receipts, and photos from the years George and I built everything from the ground up. George stepped in. "You're going through the old files." "Yes," I said. "I need to look at them." He walked closer. "Show me." And I pulled out a faded grocery receipt. $32, our weekly budget. George nodded. We made it work. We had no choice, I replied. We stretched every dollar. I opened a small notebook filled with my handwriting. This was the year Melissa turned 5. I worked nights so I could be with her in the morning. George sat down beside me. You barely slept. I didn't care, I said. She needed routine. I handed him a photo of our first store, a small building, peeling paint, cheap shelves. George looked at it. We were proud of that place. So was she, I said. She used to tell her friends her parents owned a business. He handed the photo back. She changed. I didn't argue. Instead, I took out a bank letter. This was our first loan approval. George said, we worried about missing payments every month. We worked until we were exhausted, I said, and we never told her how hard it was. That's what parents do, he replied. I kept going through the box. But maybe we made it too easy. She never saw the nights we stayed awake counting bills. She never saw us skip things so she could have what she wanted. George didn't respond. I pulled out another paper, tuition receipts. We paid for her school, every year, every class. Yes, he said. She never asked where the money came from, I said. She assumed we had it, he replied. I turned to him. We taught her to aim high, but we also taught her the wrong lesson. What lesson? He asked. That everything would just be there for her, I said, without effort, without respect. He looked at the notebooks on the floor. We thought protecting her from struggle was the right thing. Maybe it wasn't, I said. Maybe she should have seen what it cost us. George didn't deny it. I opened another envelope, store sales reports from the early years. Remember this? We didn't even pay ourselves the first 2 months. I remember, he said. And now she acts like all of this, I said, waving at the papers, belongs to her alone. He let out a slow breath. She rewrote the story. Yes, I said. In her version, she climbed by herself. She built everything. She outgrew us. George looked directly at me. You know that isn't true. I know, I said. But she believes it. He leaned back. She believes it because we let her think it. We didn't want her to feel guilty, I said. No, he replied, but now she feels entitled. I picked up a school project Melissa made when she was 9. My mom and dad work hard so I can have nice things, she wrote. I showed it to George. She knew once. He read it quietly. That was a long time ago. I set it aside. When did she lose that understanding? When she started succeeding on her own, George said. She confused independence with superiority. I looked at him. Do you think last night surprised her? No, he said. She thought she could speak to you that way because she thought nothing would happen. I didn't respond. He added, she believes she's untouchable. Why? I asked. Because we never pushed back, George replied. I closed the box. We raised a stranger. George didn't correct me. We put everything back into the box. I lifted it onto the shelf again. As we walked out, I said, last night wasn't the moment she drifted away. No, he said. It was the moment you finally saw it. I nodded. We spent years building our life, and we handed it to her piece by piece. And she thinks the pieces appeared by themselves, George added. I looked at him. Do you think she'll ever understand? She will, he said. Understanding always comes, sometimes late. I didn't ask what he meant. His tone was calm, steady, certain, just like the night before. We left the storage room and closed the door. But the conclusion stayed clear in my mind. Melissa didn't become unrecognizable last night. She became unrecognizable years ago. The morning passed quietly. George didn't say much during breakfast. He finished his coffee, cleaned his cup, and walked straight to the study. He closed the door, but not completely. I could hear drawers opening and papers shifting. After 10 minutes, I walked to the doorway. He had the old folders spread across the desk, deeds, trust documents, business records, our shared accounts, papers we hadn't touched in years. I said, "You're going through everything." "Yes," he replied. "For what?" "For clarity. I stepped inside. What does that mean exactly? It means I'm reviewing every document with her name on it. I stood beside him. All of it? All of it, he said. He picked up a thick envelope and opened it. Inside were copies of access authorizations we had signed years ago. Permissions for Melissa to step in if anything happened to us. He held one up. This was a mistake. You added her because she's our daughter, I said. I added her because I trusted her judgment, he replied. Last night showed me I was wrong. I didn't argue. He continued checking papers, flipping through pages calmly, without hesitation. He wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional. He was focused. I finally asked, "What are you planning?" He looked at me. A revision? Of what? Everything, he said. The trust, the deed, the accounts, the business structure. I felt my breath tighten, but not from fear, from certainty. Whatever George decided, he would follow through. I said quietly, "Are you sure you want to go this far?" She made a public statement last night, he replied. Now I'll make mine legally. He placed his reading glasses on the desk and pulled out a notepad. He wrote a list in clean, straight lines. Trust, revision. Transfer authority. Remove access. Restrict future control. I watched his handwriting. Firm, steady. I asked, "Do you want me involved?" "You're already involved," he said. "She disrespected you. This isn't just about the business." I nodded. "I understand." George picked up the deed to the house. Her level of access ends today. He moved to the next document. And the company? She keeps her title for appearances, but the authority ends. I said, "She's going to react badly." "She can react however she wants," he answered. "Respect isn't optional." He kept writing. His tone never changed. I leaned on the back of the chair. "Do you want to wait a few days? Let things cool?" "No," he said. "Cooling off helps when the issue is emotional. This issue is structural." I stayed silent. He continued, "Last night wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. She believes she's above us." "She's been showing signs for years," I said. He nodded, and I ignored it because I wanted peace. I looked at him. "This isn't about revenge, is it?" "No," he said. "Revenge is emotional. What I'm doing is correction." He turned to me fully. "She threw you out of your own family's Christmas dinner, in front of strangers, in front of relatives, without hesitation." I said, "Yes." "That will not stand," he replied. He gathered the documents into neat stacks. "Mr. Warren will come today. We'll finalize the changes." I asked, "Today?" "Yes," he said. "I don't want this dragging out." He checked the clock. "He'll be here in 1 hour." I watched him close each folder with care. I said quietly, "This feels final." "It is," he answered. "You're sure?" He didn't pause. "Completely." He walked past me, heading toward the kitchen to prepare the table for Warren. I stayed in the study a moment longer, looking at the papers he had arranged, years of our life organized into decisions Melissa never thought we would make. George wasn't acting out of anger. He was acting out of principle. And once he made a decision based on principle, there was no reversing it. Mr. Warren arrived exactly on time. His professionalism never changed in all the years we worked with him. I opened the door. "Good morning, Warren." "Morning, Natalie," he said. "Is George ready?" "He's in the study." Warren stepped inside with his leather briefcase. No small talk, no unnecessary greetings. That was one thing I always appreciated about him. We walked to the study. George was already standing by the table with all the documents arranged in clean stacks. Warren nodded. "You called last night. I assumed it was serious." George said, "It is." Warren placed the briefcase on the table. "Tell me." George didn't hesitate. "She threw her mother out of Christmas dinner, in front of a full table. No reason, no hesitation." Warren looked at me briefly. "That's what happened?" "Yes," I said. "Every word of it." He nodded once. "Then let's proceed." George handed him the list he wrote that morning. "These are the revisions." Warren read it slowly. "Trust revision. Authority transfer, access removal, inheritance adjustment. He looked up. All four? All four, George said. Warren tapped the paper lightly. This will dismantle everything she has authority over. That is the point, George replied. I sat down quietly while the two men worked. Warren opened the briefcase and took out updated templates, trust modification forms, deed adjustment documents, and authority revocation notices. He said, I prepared these months ago, just in case. George raised an eyebrow. You expected this? Warren replied calmly, I expected tension to turn into a decision eventually. George nodded. You were right. Warren adjusted his glasses. Let's start with the trust. Her share will be conditional from now on. George said, Good. Warren wrote quickly, Condition, respect, communication, and compliance with family boundaries. George looked at me. Are you comfortable with this? Yes, I answered. Warren moved on. Authority over the business. Currently, she has access to internal accounts and decision logs. Remove it, George said. Warren wrote it down. Effective immediately. I said, She won't take this lightly. Warren responded, She doesn't need to take it lightly. She needs to take it seriously. George asked, What about the house? Warren opened another folder. Your current deed gives her secondary access in emergencies. End that, George said. Warren nodded. Done. He slid the documents toward me. Your signature is needed here, Natalie. I signed where he pointed. Clear, steady strokes. George signed next, without stopping to reconsider. Warren reviewed everything once more. Once I seal this and file it, there's no going back. George said, Good. I asked, What happens when she finds out? That depends on how she reacts, Warren said. But legally, she won't be able to reverse anything. George leaned back slightly. She wanted to make a public statement last night. And you're making yours today, Warren replied. George looked at him. This isn't revenge. I know, Warren said. It's correction. George didn't respond, but the agreement was clear. Warren put each signed paper into the briefcase. I'll file all of it today. She will receive the formal notice within the week. George nodded. Thank you. Warren stood. One last thing. George said, What is it? Warren looked directly at both of us. His voice stayed calm, but firm. Respect should never be negotiable. Neither of us spoke. He closed the briefcase. You two built a life through sacrifice. If she chooses pride over gratitude, then she chooses consequences. George said, We're ready. Warren put on his coat. I'll call once everything is finalized. I walked him to the door. Before he left, he said quietly, Natalie, none of this is your fault. I only answered, It's necessary. He nodded and walked to his car. When I returned to the study, George was still standing there, staring at the table where all the documents had been. I asked, How do you feel? He said, Certain. And that certainty was stronger than anger. We had just removed every piece of authority Melissa thought she owned. Melissa arrived Sunday at noon, acting like nothing happened. She walked in with her purse over her shoulder, humming lightly, as if the last 48 hours didn't exist. She said, Mom, Dad, I'm here. What's for lunch? George didn't answer. He was sitting at the table, hands folded, expression steady. I sat on the other side of the room, watching her carefully. Melissa frowned. What's with the faces? Did something happen? George said, Sit down. She blinked. Why? What's going on? Sit, George repeated. She slowly lowered herself into the chair. Her eyes bounced between us. Okay? The room was silent for a few seconds. Then the front door opened. Melissa turned. Who's that, Mr.? Warren stepped inside. He closed the door behind him and walked toward the dining table with his briefcase. Melissa's face changed instantly. Why is he here? George said, He's here because of what you did. Melissa scoffed. I already told you. Everyone had too much to drink. It wasn't that big of a... George lifted his hand slightly. Stop. She froze. He continued, You humiliated your mother at Christmas dinner. You told her to leave her own family's table. You didn't hesitate. You didn't correct yourself. You didn't apologize. Melissa opened her mouth. No, George said. You'll listen. Warren placed the briefcase on the table. Melissa's breathing changed. She whispered, Dad, what is this? Warren said calmly, These are legal adjustments based on your behavior. Melissa laughed nervously. You can't be serious. George, we are. Warren opened the briefcase and pulled out the documents one by one. He said, Your authority over the business is revoked. Effective immediately. Melissa blinked fast. What? Revoked? For what? Because of one argument? George's voice stayed even. It wasn't an argument. It was your disregard for the woman who built the foundation you're standing on. She looked at me. Mom, are you really okay with this? Tell him to stop. This is extreme. I said, This is the consequence. Melissa shook her head. You're overreacting. George said, You disrespected the woman who raised you, the woman who sacrificed everything so you could succeed. Melissa snapped, Everyone fights with their parents. Warren stepped forward. Not everyone publicly humiliates them in front of a table of guests. Melissa turned toward him sharply. Stay out of this. I'm your family solicitor, Warren replied. This is exactly my place. She stood abruptly. No, I'm not doing this. I'm not sitting here while you all gang up on me. George said, Sit down. Something in his tone made her stop. She sat again, slower this time. Warren placed the next document in front of her. Your emergency access to the house is removed. Melissa stared at him. This is my parents' home. I'm their daughter. George said, You don't get to invoke the word daughter only when it benefits you. Her eyes reddened. So that's it? You're cutting me out? No, George replied. We're correcting the imbalance you created. Warren placed the third document. Your inheritance is now conditional. Melissa whispered, Conditional? George said, Respect, communication, no humiliation. Those are the conditions. She looked at me again. Mom, seriously? I said, You crossed a line. She hit the table lightly with the side of her hand. I was upset. Everyone gets upset. Warren answered. Upset is saying something harsh. You ordered her out of the house she built, in front of a dozen people. Melissa's voice cracked. I didn't mean it that way. George said, You meant it exactly that way. She swallowed hard. So you're punishing me. This isn't punishment, George said. This is accountability. Melissa's eyes filled with fear for the first time. Dad, this will ruin my place at work. The board sees my involvement with the company as part of my credibility. George replied, Then you should have considered that before you acted like someone who didn't deserve credibility. She gasped softly. Warren closed his briefcase. The changes are signed and finalized. You'll receive the formal notice this week. Melissa's voice turned small. Dad, I've worked so hard. And we've worked harder, George said. For decades. You don't get to erase our history because you enjoyed having an audience. Melissa's lips trembled. Mom, say something. I looked at her calmly. I sat quietly while you sent me out into the cold in front of strangers. Now you'll sit quietly while consequences reach you. She covered her mouth with her hand. I didn't think... George stood slowly. That is exactly the problem. She stood too, but her posture had changed. She wasn't confident anymore. She wasn't superior. She looked lost. She whispered, Dad, please, can't we just talk? We are talking, George said. You're just not getting the answer you expected. Melissa stared at the papers on the table. Her voice shook. After everything I did at the company, after everything I helped with, this is what I get? You disrespected the woman who built this family, George repeated. You lost the privilege of authority, not the other way around. She turned to me again. Mom, do you want this too? I said simply, I want boundaries. Melissa blinked. So that's it? Yes, I said. Warren closed the last clasp of the briefcase. "We're done here." George walked him to the door. Melissa stayed frozen in place, staring at the documents. When George returned, she asked quietly, "What am I supposed to do now?" George answered, "Learn." Then he stepped aside, giving her room to leave. Melissa walked past him slowly, her hands shaking. She didn't slam the door, she didn't yell, she just left, silently. The next 2 days were quiet. George went to work as usual. I stayed home and kept to my routine. Neither of us mentioned Melissa. There was nothing more to say. On the third afternoon, someone knocked on the door. I looked through the peephole. Melissa stood there alone. No makeup, no confidence, just waiting. I opened the door only a few inches. She said, "Mom, can we talk?" I answered, "About what?" "About everything," she said. "About what happened. About Dad. About the documents. I didn't think it would go that far." I kept the door where it was. "You didn't think about anything that night." She swallowed. "I was upset." I shook my head. "No, you were cruel." Melissa's eyes tightened. "I didn't mean it." "Cruelty isn't a mistake," I said. "It's a choice." She looked down. "I know how it looked." I answered. "Everyone saw. That was the problem." "Mom, I was drunk," she said quickly. "That didn't make you say it," I replied. "It only made you loud." Melissa blinked hard. "Can I come in?" "No," I said. "We can talk here." She glanced behind me into the house. "Is Dad home?" "No," she hesitated. "He won't even text me back." "That's between you and him," I said. She took a small step forward. "I need a chance to fix this." "You had that chance the moment you opened your mouth at dinner," I replied. "You didn't use it." Her voice cracked. "So that's it? You're shutting me out?" "I'm setting boundaries," I said. "That's different." "I can do better," she said. "I can apologize." "You're not apologizing," I replied. "You're panicking." Melissa flinched slightly. I didn't think Dad would take legal action." "You didn't think anyone would take action," I said. "You believed nothing had consequences." She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe. "I've already lost a lot this week." "That wasn't us," I said. "That was you." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I kept my voice steady. "People react to the person you show them. You showed them entitlement. You showed them disrespect. That's why you're losing things." "Mom," she whispered, "I didn't expect you to be this cold." "I'm not cold," I said. "I'm clear." She took in a shaky breath. "What am I supposed to do now?" "You start by understanding what you did," I answered. "Really understanding it, not excusing it." She nodded slowly, eyes glossy but controlled. "And after that?" "That's up to you," I said. "But nothing changes today." Her shoulders sank. "I feel like I'm losing everything." "Then stop giving yourself reasons to lose things," I said. She looked straight at me. "Do you hate me?" "No," I said immediately. "But I don't trust you." She closed her eyes for a moment. "Can I at least try?" "You can," I said. "Trying doesn't mean entering the house." She opened her eyes again. "When can we talk properly?" "When you understand the difference between being upset and being disrespectful." She nodded weakly. "I'll try." I didn't move the door. She finally stepped back. "Mom, thank you for talking to me." I answered, "Talking is not forgiving." She nodded again. "I know." I closed the door gently but firmly. Inside, the house returned to silence. George came home an hour later. "Someone knocked earlier?" "Yes," I said. "Melissa." He asked, "You let her in?" "No," I replied. "We talked at the door." "How did it go?" She wanted to explain. "And?" I told her the truth. George looked at me. "Good." We didn't say anything else. The house felt steady again. For a few days after she came to my door, I didn't hear from Melissa. The silence didn't surprise me. Consequences always take time to settle. But on Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a message, Just a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then one more. All from different numbers. A few minutes later, Clara, one of Melissa's friends, sent a text. "I think Melissa needs to talk to you. Things aren't good." I didn't reply. I didn't ask for details. If Melissa needed to talk, she knew how to reach me properly. The next afternoon, Melissa finally called from her own number. Her voice was thin. "Mom, do you have a minute?" "Yes," I said. I just need to tell you what's been happening." "You can talk," I replied. She exhaled shakily. "My friends aren't returning my calls." "Why?" I asked. "They said they don't want to be part of family drama." She paused. "A few of them said what I did at dinner was embarrassing." "What did you expect?" I asked. "I thought they'd understand," Melissa said. "But they're avoiding me." "That's how people react to arrogance," I said. "They back away." She didn't defend herself. That was new. Then she said quietly, "And Daniel left." "Her husband." I waited. "Why?" "He said he needed space. He said he doesn't want to be tied to any more scandals." Her voice tightened. "He packed a bag and went to stay at his brother's." I kept my tone even. "Did you two argue?" "He said what I did showed him I'm not the person he thought I was." "And you think he's wrong?" I asked. She was silent. Then she whispered, "No." I heard her take a long breath. "Mom, I've never felt this alone." I answered plainly, "Being alone doesn't mean you're being punished. It means you're being shown something." "Shown what?" she asked. "How people respond when the mask drops," I said. She didn't argue. After a few seconds, she asked, "Can I come over?" "No," I said, "not yet." She swallowed audibly. "Okay," I continued. "Melissa, I'm not shutting you out, but you're not entering this house until you understand the weight of your actions." She whispered, "I do. I think I do." "You don't fully," I replied. "You're feeling the consequences, not the understanding." Another short silence. Then she said, "Everyone's acting like I'm some kind of monster." "That's because you shocked them," I replied. "People don't forget scenes like the one you made." She said quietly, "I didn't expect it to follow me like this." "Actions follow people," I said. "That's how life works." Her voice broke a little. "Mom, I'm scared I ruined everything." I didn't soften my tone. "Then you start rebuilding from honesty." Melissa didn't speak right away. When she finally did, her voice was lower, calmer. "I stayed home all day today. I didn't go to work." "Why?" "I couldn't face anyone," she said. "I kept thinking about what I said to you, and how everyone looked at me after." "That's reflection," I said. "That's good." She continued. "I turned off the lights and just sat there. The house felt empty." "That's what happens when noise stops," I replied. She nodded, even though I couldn't see her. "I didn't like the quiet." "Quiet shows truth," I said. There was a long pause, then she asked, "Do you think I'm a horrible person?" "No," I said immediately. "But I think you acted like someone who forgot where she came from." She let out a soft breath. "Mom, when did I become like this?" "You became like this when you started believing that success meant superiority," I said. She didn't reject it. She didn't deny it. She only said, "I see that now." I continued, "And when people around you stop enabling that belief, it feels like your whole life is collapsing." "That's exactly how it feels," she whispered. I said, "That collapse is clarity." Melissa didn't speak for several seconds. Then she said, "I want to fix things, even if it takes time." "That's the right mindset," I said. Do you think Dad will ever talk to me again?" "When you show that you've changed," I said. Her voice fell. "I know I hurt you both." "Yes," I replied. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Not loud, not desperate, just real. I didn't rush to comfort her. I said, "Understanding comes before apology." so don't confuse the two." "I won't," she said. After a moment, Melissa asked, "Can I call you tomorrow?" "You can." She took a slow breath. "Thank you for answering today." "You're welcome." She said softly, "Good night, Mom." "Good night." When the call ended, I set my phone down. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt clarity. Melissa wasn't broken. She was finally seeing herself without excuses, and sometimes that was the only way a person could grow. On Saturday morning, my phone buzzed at 7:12 a.m. I had just finished making coffee. The house was quiet. George was reading the paper at the table. A message appeared on my screen. "Melissa, can we talk? Christmas morning?" I stared at the text for a few seconds. Not surprised, not emotional, just assessing. George looked up. "It's from her?" "Yes." He folded the paper. "What's she asking?" "She wants to talk. Christmas morning." He nodded once. "Your call." I didn't answer immediately. I put the phone down and took a sip of coffee. George said, "You don't have to decide fast." "I'm not deciding fast," I replied. "I'm deciding correctly." He leaned back in his chair. "What's your instinct?" "That she wants comfort, not accountability," I said, "and I'm not offering comfort." "She already learned that," he said. "Yes," I answered, "but she hasn't learned enough." George didn't push me. He never did. I looked at the text again. "If I meet her, it has to be on my terms." "It will be," he said. I typed nothing yet. George asked, "Where would you want to meet?" "A public place," I said. "Neutral ground, quiet, controlled." He nodded. "Good." "No expectations, no promises," I added. "That's exactly the point." I held the phone in my hand. "Do you think she's ready to listen?" "She wants relief," he replied. "If she's ready for truth, we'll find out." I breathed out slowly. "I'll meet her." George didn't react with surprise. "Set the rules." I typed, "Me. 1 breakfast. No promises." Melissa responded within seconds. "Melissa, thank you. I'll pick the time, anywhere you want." I showed the message to George. He said, "She's being cautious." "She should be," I said. I added another line, "Me. 9 a.m. at Clark's Diner." It was a simple, quiet place we used to go when she was younger. No noise, no crowds, no distractions. Melissa replied, "I'll be there." I locked my phone. George said, "You sound steady." "I am steady," I replied. He nodded. "Good, don't soften." "I'm not softening," I said. He took a sip of his coffee. "You're choosing to meet her. That already shows your strength." "I'm not meeting her to fix things," I said. "I'm meeting her to clarify them." "That's the right reason." I walked to the window and looked out. The yard was quiet, the air cold, but the world felt still and manageable. George asked, "Do you want me nearby?" "No," I said. "Not for this. She needs to face me, not us." He nodded again. No argument. I sat back down. "She'll expect emotion. I'll give her information." "She'll expect forgiveness," he said. "And she won't get it," I replied. "Not today." He folded his arms. "What are you hoping she understands tomorrow?" "That nothing returns to the way it was," I said. "And that respect is the minimum requirement, not a gift." George said calmly, "You're leading this." "I know." He tapped the table lightly. "Natalie, you're handling this with more clarity than most people could." "I'm not most people," I said. "And she needs to see that." Later that afternoon, Melissa sent one more text. "Thank you for giving me a chance." I didn't respond. George glanced at my phone. "Not answering?" "No." He asked, "Reason?" "She needs to understand that meeting me is not a reward. It's an opportunity," I said. He nodded. "Good." The rest of the day moved quietly. No tension, no worry. I prepared myself the same way I prepared for business meetings years ago. Calm mind, clear objective, no emotional noise. At night, before going to bed, George asked, "Do you feel ready for tomorrow?" "Yes," I said, "and I feel in control." "Good," he replied. "Stay firm." "I will." I didn't set an alarm. I didn't need one. When the morning came, I woke naturally. Melissa wanted a meeting, but I set the terms, and tomorrow she would learn what a real boundary feels like. I arrived at Clark's Diner at 8:55 a.m. The place was quiet, just a few tables occupied by older couples finishing their coffee. I chose a corner booth where I could see the entrance clearly. At exactly 9 o'clock, Melissa walked in. She spotted me immediately and approached slowly. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Sit," I replied. She slid into the seat across from me. Her hands were tied together in her lap, a sign she was trying to control her nerves. A waitress came over. "Coffee?" "Yes," I said. Melissa nodded. "Same for me." When the waitress left, Melissa looked at me carefully. "Thank you for meeting me." "You're here," I said. "Start talking." She took a breath. "I've been thinking about everything. What I said, what I did, the consequences." "Good," I said. "Reflection is useful." She lowered her eyes. "I hurt you." "Yes," I replied. "And I hurt Dad." "You did." She didn't defend herself. "I want to explain." "You can," I said, "but explanation isn't justification." She nodded once. "I understand." When the coffee arrived, Melissa waited until the waitress left before speaking again. "Throwing you out at dinner, it made me feel powerful," she said. Her voice didn't shake. She said it plainly, almost clinically. "I thought it showed I was in control." "It didn't show control," I said. "It showed ego." She accepted that without argument. "You're right. I let people influence me. I let the image of being strong mean more than actually being respectful." "That's your mistake," I said. "Confusing image with substance." She exhaled. "It was weakness pretending to be strength." "Now you're telling the truth," I said. She looked straight at me. "I don't want to be that person anymore." "That depends on your actions, not your words," I replied. She nodded slowly. "I know." After a moment, she said quietly, "Dad removing my authority, losing access, it woke me up. And my friends pulling away. And Daniel leaving." "That's what consequences do," I said. "They make reality louder." Melissa looked down at her coffee. "I'm not asking for everything back. I'm not asking for Dad to undo anything. I'm not expecting forgiveness." "Good," I said, "because forgiveness isn't immediate, and it doesn't erase boundaries." She swallowed. "I just want to rebuild something, even if it's small." "You want stability," I said. "Yes," she replied. "You want clarity." "Yes." "You want a place in this family that isn't built on entitlement." "Yes," she said again. I nodded. "Then I'll give you the same thing I would give anyone who crossed a line this deeply." She tensed, waiting. "Rules," I said. Her voice was small but serious. "What kind of rules?" "Simple ones," I replied. "3 of them." She straightened her back slightly. "I'm listening." I leaned forward, steady and clear. "Rule 1, honesty. No half-truths, no excuses, no pretending." "Understood," she said. "Rule 2, respect. Real respect, not politeness, not image-based behavior. Respect in private and in public." She nodded. "Yes." "Rule 3, I continued. No humiliation, ever again. Not in anger, not in front of people, not in any form." Melissa breathed out slowly. "You have my word." "Words are cheap," I said. "Prove it." "I will," she said. The waitress returned with our plates. Neither of us touched the food right away. I asked, "Do you understand why there are rules now?" "Yes," she said, "because you're giving me a chance without giving me power." "That's correct," I said. She hesitated. And Dad? He'll observe, I replied. He won't interfere, but he won't bend. I don't expect him to, she said. Good, I replied. Melissa finally took a small bite of her food, then put down her fork. I know you don't trust me. I don't, I said plainly. She didn't flinch. Then I'll earn it. You'll try, I corrected. Yes, she said. A brief silence settled between us, not emotional, not uncomfortable, just factual. Then Melissa spoke again. I'm not asking to come home for Christmas dinner again. I just want a starting point. This is the starting point, I said. Breakfast, conversation, rules. And after this? You show consistency, I said. Not apologies, not dramatic gestures, consistency. She nodded firmly. I can do that. We continued eating quietly for a few minutes. When the plates were nearly empty, Melissa said, I'm not the same person I was last week. I'll believe that when your actions show it, I replied. She accepted that. Fair. I stood up first. We're done for today. Melissa stood too. Can we meet again? When I decide the time, I said. She nodded. I'll wait. Outside the diner, she stopped before heading to her car. Mom, thank you. For what? I asked. For giving me structure, she said. I didn't respond. I got into my car. She watched me for a moment, then turned away. I wasn't offering peace today. I was offering direction. And she understood the difference. That evening, after the breakfast with Melissa, the house was quiet again. George was reading in the living room. I walked to the Christmas tree and sat down on the small bench beside it. The ornament Melissa made when she was a child hung near the center. The paint was chipped. Her handwriting was uneven. I picked it up and held it between my fingers. George looked over. You're thinking? Yes, I said. About her? About the whole picture, I replied. He set his book down. Tell me. I didn't rush. People talk about forgiveness like it's a switch, as if you can flip it and everything returns to normal. And it doesn't, George said. No, I answered. It doesn't. He waited. I continued. Forgiveness isn't approval. It isn't reward. It isn't pretending nothing happened. George nodded. Correct. It's peace, I said. But peace with boundaries. That's the only real kind, he responded. I looked at the ornament again. She wants change. But she wants change to feel like comfort. That's not how change works. No, he said. It has to feel like structure. I placed the ornament back on the branch. Today was structure. George leaned forward. How did she respond when you set the rules? She accepted them, I said. Calmly, no excuses. That's a start. It is, I said, but I'm not moving the line. You shouldn't. I rested my hands on my lap. She expects forgiveness to mean access, but forgiveness just means I'm not carrying what she did anymore. It doesn't mean she gets to walk back into the same place she had. Good, George said. That's clarity. I looked at him. Do you think I was too harsh? He shook his head once. No, you were precise. That matters, I said. Yes, he replied. Precision prevents confusion. I nodded. And confusion is how boundaries get broken. George gave a small approving sound. Exactly. The lights from the tree reflected on the floor. Plain, steady, quiet. I said, I'm not trying to rebuild the past with her. The past is gone. I'm trying to build something new with rules. He asked, Do you think she understands that? She's beginning to, I answered, but it will take time. George folded his arms. She had a stable foundation. She forgot how it was built. And now she's learning, I said, the long way. He looked at me carefully. You handled this better than anyone I've ever seen. I handled it the way it needed to be handled, I replied. He gave a firm nod. Yes, without fear, without anger, without weakness. I looked at the ornament one more time. There's one lesson she needs to learn fully. What is it? he asked. I said it plainly, with no emotion attached. Dignity is not negotiable. George didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, and she'll hear that in every boundary you keep. That's the point, I said. She'll adjust, he added, or she won't. Either way, you're steady. I know, I replied. I stood and turned off the tree lights. Today wasn't reconciliation. No, George said. It was instruction. And I'll keep instructing, I said, until she understands. George picked up his book again. She will. I walked toward the hallway. The house felt calm, controlled, balanced. This wasn't the end of anything. This was the beginning of something new, with rules, with clarity, with dignity intact. On Christmas night, the house was quiet again. George was upstairs getting ready for bed. I stayed in the living room, sitting beside the tree. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a message from Melissa. Thank you for coming today. I looked at the screen. I didn't open the message thread. I didn't reply. George walked down the stairs and saw the phone light. From her? Yes. What did she say? Thanking me. He asked, Are you responding? No. He nodded once. No judgment, just understanding. I set the phone face down. She needs space to process. My silence will give her that. Good, George said. I stood and walked to the tree. The lights were soft, steady. The ornament Melissa made as a child hung near the center. Next to it, I placed a new ornament I bought last week. Plain, simple, unmarked. George joined me. You put up another one? Yes, I said. He looked at them. Why next to each other? Because they represent two truths, I replied. Who she was and who she's trying to become. Reasonable, he said. We stood there quietly. Then he asked, Do you think she's going to change? She might, I said. But if she does, it'll be because she learns, not because she expects us to fix anything. He agreed. Good. I sat on the bench again. I'm not angry anymore. That's progress, he said. I'm not forgetting, I added. That's clarity, he responded. I looked at him. Do you think she understands the difference? She's beginning to, he said. Your boundaries are teaching her more than any lecture could. I nodded. That's the goal. He sat beside me. You handled this entire situation with control. I handled it the way it needed to be handled, I said, not with emotion, with structure. George gave a small sound of approval. That's why things are settling. They're not perfect, I said. Nothing needs to be, he replied. A few minutes passed in comfortable silence. Then he asked, How do you feel about the future? Steady, I said. Not worried, not hopeful. Just steady. That's enough, he said. I looked at the two ornaments again. Our relationship with her won't be what it used to be. It shouldn't be, George said. It'll be something different, I said. Something earned. He nodded. Something she understands the value of. We both looked toward the tree. No drama, no emotion, just truth. I'm ready for that version, I said. And she will be too, he answered, if she keeps doing the work. I breathed slowly, calm and settled. Some stories don't end with perfection. George looked at me. No. I finished the sentence quietly, as much to myself as anyone. They end with understanding. He nodded once, firm and approving. I turned off the tree lights. The room dimmed gently. The two ornaments stayed next to each other on the branch, unchanged, simple, steady. I picked up my phone from the coffee table as we walked toward the hallway. The message from Melissa was still there, still unread, still unanswered. And that was exactly how it needed to be. Boundaries weren't walls. They were structure. And structure was the beginning of peace. George turned off the last light. I closed the living room door. Christmas ended quietly, not perfect, not repaired, but finally understood. In the end, I didn't answer Melissa's message that night, and maybe that was the clearest answer of all. Some wounds don't need noise, some boundaries don't need explanation, and some relationships, Begin again only when everyone understands their place, their role, and their responsibility. Christmas didn't end perfectly for us, but it ended honestly. And at this age, honesty is more valuable than perfection. If my story reminds you of something in your own life, a moment you finally chose your dignity, a moment you learned to set boundaries, a moment you stopped accepting less than respect, just know this: you're not alone. And there's nothing wrong with choosing peace over chaos. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Your presence here means more than you know. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories of strength, family, justice, and quiet wisdom, feel free to subscribe to Grandma Life Stories, leave a comment, or simply join me again next time. Until then, take care of yourself, protect your dignity, and remember, some stories don't end with perfection. They end with understanding. I'll see you in the next video.